When it came to Roman emperors, few had a rise as unlikely or a death as suspicious as Claudius. Once dismissed as a stammering, limping oddity, Claudius shocked Rome by surviving palace intrigue, assassinations, and a notoriously bloodthirsty family to become emperor. And not just any emperor. He expanded the empire, overhauled its bureaucracy, and ruled for 13 years. But in 54 AD, everything changed over dinner. One night, Claudius sat down to a plate of mushrooms, his favorite dish. Hours later, he was dead. So what was it, food poisoning? Yeah, probably not. Ancient sources hint at something far more sinister. A carefully orchestrated assassination with his ambitious wife Agrippina the Younger at the center of it all. And why? Because her son Nero was waiting in the wings and Claudius was starting to have second thoughts about who should inherit the throne. This is the story of one of Rome's most infamous deaths, laced with power, paranoia, and poison. We'll dive into the shadowy final hours of Claudius, unravel the web of conspiracies, and explore just how deadly imperial politics could be when the fate of an empire was at stake. Because in ancient Rome, the most dangerous course at dinner was ambition. Welcome to the Roman Empire. Before he wore the purple robe of an emperor, Claudius was a joke, at least to his own family. Born in 10 BCE into the powerful Julio-Claudian dynasty, Tiberius Claudius Drusus was the nephew of Emperor Tiberius and the uncle of Caligula. But he was also considered weak, awkward, and unfit to rule. A limp, a stammer, and bouts of illness made him the object of ridicule in an imperial family that valued strength and charisma. His own mother reportedly called him a monster, and most of his life was spent in the shadows, more of a scholar than a statesman. But then everything changed in 41 AD. After the assassination of his nephew, the mad Emperor Caligula, a terrified Claudius was discovered hiding behind a curtain in the palace. Shockingly, the Praetorian Guard declared him emperor. Whether out of loyalty or because they thought they could control him, it didn't matter. Claudius was suddenly the most powerful man in the Roman world. And to everyone's surprise, he was good at it. He expanded the empire into Britannia, reformed the judicial system, and strengthened imperial administration. But power came at a price. Claudius surrounded himself with freedmen and wives, some loyal, some lethal. And in the end, this would be his undoing. By the early 50s AD, Emperor Claudius had ruled Rome for over a decade, and the cracks were beginning to show. He was aging, increasingly paranoid, and surrounded by people who didn't necessarily have his best interests at heart. His court had become a nest of rivalries, gossip, and manipulation, none more dangerous than his own wife, Agrippina the Younger. Agrippina was no ordinary empress. A direct descendant of Augustus, sister to Caligula, and mother to the young Nero, she was fiercely ambitious and politically savvy. When she married Claudius, who was her uncle by the way, it was widely believed to be a calculated move to put her son in line for the throne. And it worked. Claudius adopted Nero and even gave him priority over his own biological son, Britannicus. But with power came tension. As Nero's popularity soared, Claudius reportedly began to regret his decision. Ancient sources suggest he was considering removing Nero from the succession entirely and replacing him with Britannicus. This decision, if true, would have shattered Agrippina's entire plan. At the same time, Claudius was growing more isolated. His trusted freedmen were falling from favor, and Agrippina was consolidating control. The emperor had become a liability to her vision of the future, and in imperial Rome, liabilities had a habit of dying early. On the night of October the 13th, 54 AD, Emperor Claudius sat down for what would be his final meal. The dish? It was his favorite, a plate of mushrooms. But these weren't just any mushrooms, according to ancient historians. These were allegedly laced with poison. The accounts vary, but they all point fingers at one person, Agrippina. Some say the poison was slipped into the mushrooms directly. Others claim it wasn't strong enough at first, so a second dose was administered, possibly by Claudius's own physician, Xenophon, who may have used a poisonous feather to help him vomit. If that sounds far-fetched, well, welcome to Roman imperial medicine. Whatever the method, the result was the same. Claudius fell violently ill, retching and fading fast. But the death wasn't immediate. It dragged on for hours, maybe even into the next day. All the while, Agrippina kept the palace tightly sealed. No officials, no messengers. Rome remained in the dark as its emperor lay dying behind closed doors. But why the delay? Simple, she needed time. Time to secure Nero's position, to prepare the Praetorian Guard, and to control the announcement of Claudius's death. When word finally broke, Claudius was gone and Nero was emperor. The transfer of power was clean. Too clean. When the death of Emperor Claudius was finally made public, Rome barely had time to react before Nero was declared emperor. He was just 16 years old. The transition was suspiciously swift. The Senate gave its approval without protest, and the Praetorian Guard, now firmly in Agrippina's pocket, pledged their loyalty. Claudius's biological son Britannicus was only 13 at the time, and legally still too young to rule. That didn't stop Agrippina and Nero from keeping him sidelined. Permanently. Officially, Claudius had died of natural causes. The imperial court organized a grand funeral. Nero delivered a eulogy written by Seneca, his tutor, praising Claudius as a wise and noble ruler. But behind the pomp and ceremony, few believed the story. Whispers of poisoning spread through the city. Some mocked Claudius, saying he had finally become a god after eating a divine mushroom. In the months that followed, Agrippina ruled behind the scenes. Coins were minted with her image alongside Nero's, decrees bore her name, she sat in Senate meetings, an unthinkable breach of Roman norms. But Nero was growing up fast and growing tired of his mother's control. Claudius was gone, the empire had a new ruler, but the deadly dance of Roman politics was just getting started. The death of Claudius may be one of the more theatrical assassinations in Roman history, complete with poison, family betrayal, and imperial ambition. But it was far from unique. In fact, if there's one thing the Roman Empire excelled at, it was producing emperors who met violent ends. Assassination in Rome wasn't just an occasional crime, it was a political tool, a way to correct a succession, a method to remove a rival. A shortcut to power. Take Julius Caesar for example, the blueprint for all Roman betrayals. In 44 BC, he was stabbed 23 times by senators who claimed they were defending the Republic. Brutus, Cassius, and their co-conspirators thought that they were saving Rome from dictatorship. Rather, they plunged it into civil war. Then there was Caligula, Claudius's own nephew. At first, Caligula was welcomed as a savior, but after a few years of erratic behavior, executions, and alleged divine delusions, the Praetorian Guard had enough. In 41 AD, they cornered him in a corridor and stabbed him to death, ushering in Claudius's unexpected rise. And Claudius's successor Nero, well, his end came in 68 AD when even his own army turned against him. Hunted and abandoned, Nero fled Rome and ultimately took his own life, famously uttering, "What an artist dies in me!" Later emperors fared no better. Commodus, son of Marcus Aurelius, was strangled in his bath after plunging the empire into near ruin. Caracalla, known for massacres and cruelty, was killed by his own bodyguard whilst relieving himself on the side of the road. Even Domitian, a strong ruler in many respects, was stabbed in a palace conspiracy that included members of his own household. The pattern was brutally consistent. Gain too much power, alienate too many allies, or just trust the wrong people, and the knives came out. Claudius, for all his intelligence and caution, couldn't break the cycle. He was emperor in name, but a pawn in the deadly game of dynastic politics. The moment he outlived his usefulness, his fate was sealed, just like so many others before and after him. In Rome, power wasn't just dangerous, it was often fatal. The death of Emperor Claudius marked more than just the end of a ruler. It was the beginning of one of the most infamous reigns in Roman history. Whether Claudius died from poisoned mushrooms or a doctored feather, one thing is clear. His death wasn't just a family tragedy. It was a political assassination carried out in the shadows of a palace obsessed with power. And it worked. Nero, barely old enough to shave, became emperor. Agrippina got her wish, at least for a while. But Roman history has a brutal rhythm. The same forces that lift emperors to the throne often drag them back down. Claudius had survived palace politics longer than most, but even he couldn't escape the ambition of those closest to him. His death reminds us that in Rome, emperors didn't just fall on the battlefield. They could fall at the dinner table. Thank you so much for watching this episode of the Roman Empire. Please do subscribe if you enjoyed it, as it's really going to help us out. And make sure to click the bell icon so that you get a notification when we release a new video every Friday. Until next time, hope everyone has a great week. Cheers!